We're up to part 7. You remember? You met all the characters. You've got all the good characters. You've got all of the not so nice ones. We're back with Amos. Part 7. Having climbed onto the workbench again, Amos fumbled with the latch of the casement window and pulled the two halves inward. A cold gust of wind swept into the toy factory. Nightfall was fast approaching. The fiery red western sky was turning purple, and the leafless trees swayed, and the deep, dead grass rippled like the brown surface of a muddy pool. The other members of Amos's mission were on the bench behind him. Burl, the elephant, Butterscotch, the dog, Patch, the cavalier cat, Old Gibbons, and Skippy, the rabbit. They had all said goodbye to the other Oddkins, the penguins, the gravel-throated frog, the cats, the dogs, the monkeys, who would remain behind to defend the factory, if nasty toys did indeed climb out of the darker regions beneath the old building. The winter-seared lawn was only a few feet below the window, and Amos urged Burl to leave quickly. The elephant stood on the sill for a moment, hesitant. His large ears rose and fell as the wind got underneath them. "My kind were meant to rule," he told Amos. "They weren't meant for jumping." "And my kind," Amos said, "were meant to eat honey and to catch fish with our paws and to hibernate in caves. But if I have to roller skate on an airplane wing in order to accomplish what Uncle Isaac asked me to do, I wouldn't hesitate." "I'd never hibernate in a cave," Burl said, teetering on the windowsill at the wind flapping both his vest and his ears. "Mice might be living in caves, and there might be bats too, which are like nothing but flying mice. I don't like mice. No, sir. Like all elephants, I have a healthy fear of mice. Horrid little creatures." He shivered. "I'm sorry to hear that," Amos said, "because there's a mouse on the workbench right behind you." Burl squealed with fear and jumped out the window. He landed solidly on both stumpy feet. As lightning flickered in the darkness sky, he turned and looked up at the window, obviously surprised by his sure-footedness. If he had realized that he'd been tricked, he wasn't angry. He grinned and waved his trunk at Amos. Outside, the trees surrounding the toy factory appeared to be melting into one enormous black blot. On the lawn, shadows were lengthening. Butterscotch leaped down to the grass without hesitation, and Patch followed with the wondrous agility of his kind. As the oldest of the 6, Gibbons was the least spry. Over the decades, Uncle Isaac had repaired Gibbons' stitching when necessary, but the elder creature's joints and fabric were not as flexible as they'd once been. Besides, he was a scholar, bookish by nature, not created for such adventures as these. "Can you do it?" Amos asked worriedly. "Of course," said Gibbons. He pitched his cane down onto the dead brown grass, and his long snout twitched. He raised one eyebrow, and he looked sideways at Amos. "Fortunately, my spectacles are glued to my nose," and he jumped. Skippy stepped to the window and said, "I would prefer a ladder." "We don't have a ladder," Amos said. "A rope, then, will do." "No rope." "A parachute?" the rabbit asked. "It's only a few feet down. A helium-filled balloon would be nice." Amos planted one foot against Skippy's tail and shoved him out the window. The rabbit made a frantic effort to twirl his long ears as if they were blades of a helicopter, but instead of keeping him aloft, they became tangled. He hit the ground, rolled, and knocked over all of the other Oddkins who were waiting for him on the ground. Standing on the windowsill, Amos looked down at his friends as they picked themselves up from the wintry dry grass, and he thought they looked pathetically small and helpless. The world beyond the toy factory suddenly seemed huge, frighteningly vast. The sky was even bigger than the land beneath it, barely touched by the light of the west, the blackest of blacks in the east, and the full of churning storm clouds. The chilly and powerful wind chased crisp leaves across the lawn, rattling as the bare branches of trees, and caused the evergreen shrubs to shiver and rust as if they were alive. The city and Mrs. Shannon's toy shop seemed as far away as the moon. Dear God, Amos thought, the world is so big, we are so small, and I'm afraid. But then he said to himself, Alpha and Omega. I'll be the first to face up to every challenge and the last to retreat. I'll be the first to forge ahead and the last to surrender to fear. He nodded and said aloud, Okey doke. Then he jumped. He landed on his feet, stumbled but did not fall. By the time he turned and looked up, the corduroy monkey named Scamp was closing the halves of the casement window. Good luck, Scamp called to them. We'll need all the luck we can get, Skippy said as he peered anxiously around the blistery night and the lowering sky. We'll make our own luck, said Patch, speaking with all the confidence of a heroic cavalier. His bushy tail fluttered in the wind and the wide sleeves of his shirt billowed. Skippy said, "Is your hat sewed to your head?" "Sewed tight," Patch confirmed. "Well," Skippy said, "that's one thing we don't have to worry about." Amos said, "Enough talk. Let's go." Here's a picture of Burl before jumping off the window. Hope you're enjoying. See you tomorrow.